All right, here we are, guys. We are live. Bono stuff. That's me. I'm Bo with Jesse and Angela Lin, not related that we know of. And they are from Where Are You From podcast that they've started. And I was literally a few days ago, I was trying to download a few episodes, and I went down to W because I thought it was Where Are You From, but it's but Where Are You From? Just to be clear.
Where are you really
Where are you
from?
really from?
Yes.
That's right. And tell us real quick the origins of that name and the meaning behind all that.
Well, I think it's a triggering phrase for most Asian American people. And I think it's valid for people outside the Asian community as well. Anyone who doesn't look traditionally white or American on the outside has gotten that question in some way or fashion. But where are you from? No, really, where are you really from? What are you? Those are variations that we've gotten. And because our podcast is all about Asian American identity and kind of dissecting what that really means for us, we thought it would be fun to play into this very easy to latch on to classic phrase that we always get asked.
Yeah, you're like, I'm from New York. No, but where are you really from?
That's
it. There. Yeah.
But I think our guests have taken it and also transformed it in a way where it's like you can answer it how you want to. A lot of the times you're put on the spot and you're like, and you really want to like give the person a clap back or say something witty or come up with something. And I think asking our guests, they've been able to come up with some of those more funnier things or spin the question in a way that's a little bit more positive to their own self than you would experience in real life.
Yeah, and again, for anyone listening now, I'd definitely encourage you to go check out, download a few of their episodes if you can. And one of the most recent episode you guys did with 5 a.m. Ramen, I wanted to say this real quick, was funny. You met Angela, you met him when he was doing ramen tours, right? And it's funny because I used to do pizza tours of Brooklyn. And
nice.
and so that was one of my favorite things, and I would just like start up at the Brooklyn Bridge, and then we'd go all over Brooklyn, specifically that, you know, like the real New York, as I like to call it, and literally like, did you finish your pie? Okay, we're going to the next place to have like a chicken sandwich or more pizza or whatever. So anyway,
how does that jive with your fitness life though? Because
that's why I have to work out.
CrossFit life.
Yeah. Well, that's I love food. I consider, you know, I don't like using the term foodie, but yeah, I mean, I would probably be a Men's Health, you know, cover model if I didn't love food so much. But I just don't care. I just don't care about a 6-pack or whatever. I joke about this being my power belly, but it is something as I grow older. Like, yeah, I've been like, all right, I got COVID recently, and you know, I know dairy is something that doesn't help my health, despite how much I love pizza. But the other good thing is, leaving New York, there's not very good pizza anywhere outside of that. So, you know,
this
it is
true.
It's continuing to have those conversations and experimentation. Yeah, when I was in New York, it was definitely the good thing, again, about living in New York, as you can attest. And Jesse, did you ever live in New York?
I'm living here now.
Oh, there you go. There you go. How long you been there now?
Too long to say.
But what I was going to say is that the good thing that I can say attest to, especially with my job and going to people's houses in the fitness kind of and healthcare space, is I was probably taking 20,000 steps a day easily, you know, between subways and just going from wherever to wherever. And I had a bike, and riding your bicycle around New York City, if there's whatever that Joseph Gordon-Levitt movie, I think they're all about. I don't even.
Days of Summer.
No, where he's a
the
bike
one
messenger.
He was a bike messenger.
Where he's riding around, and I
didn't
also
watch it, but
yeah, I never saw it. But I got the premise like pretty. I don't think we needed to watch it. It wasn't exactly Fast or Furious, but anyway. But I appreciate you guys do have some good pop references in your pod, so I feel like I can do a little bit more of that. I try to minimize it because I can geek out on a lot of that stuff in the food. But yeah, to answer your question, Angela, and I like that you guys are the natural podcast host, turning it around on me. I mean, the pizza tours was definitely like, we got to earn this. Also, is like, yeah, we're gonna do an hour-long, you know, pretty intense session and earn our, you know, 20,000 calories. So yeah, it's but it really is about the experience and also like the flavors and just understanding that like and again, it's amazing to me traveling so much around the world and America even is people not understanding just how good and how different like New York pizza is compared to what they're used to. And it's just like it's just such a different level. And I'm sure, I don't know if you can speak that way about different Asian food or ramen, since you had your ramen guy on. And from what I understand, again, that's a pretty some big gradients in like, you know, again, you mentioned the instant ramen, and there was the Michelin level instant ramen, to give you guys a shout out. And what was the code again, if people wanted to order that?
Oh, really? From 5, the number 5, at instantramen.jp.
There you go.
Basically, Frank is, he lives in Japan, he lives in Tokyo, he's a ramen expert, and he was giving ramen tours before the pandemic, but now obviously things have changed, and so he's doing these like curated premium instant ramen ships from Tokyo, and one of those shops is the Michelin star restaurant, which is pretty crazy to think that ramen could be classified as something that would be given a Michelin star.
Yeah, I mean, it really, I love Michelin stars. I don't know how many Michelin restaurants I've eaten at in my life, but it's a decent amount. And again, being in New York City, there's a lot. And there was one in I think was it Williamsburg? No, it was in like Greenpoint, and it was the cheapest Michelin star I think in the world, or something like that, or at least in New York. I forgot the name of it. It was like a Mexican place though. But yeah, there's some really cool stuff, and there's of course Tim Ho Wan is Michelin star in Hong Kong, I think, but there is one in downtown Manhattan. That was part of my like Manhattan food tour that I used to take people on there. So I had that. We go to Milk Bar, Tim Ho Wan for the roast pork buns. And anyway, we're going down a fun food path, and
those are very different flavors. Milk Bar and Tim Ho Wan.
Well, the Tim Ho Wan, I would just do the to skip the line, because usually there was long lines. So we would just go to the little bar there, and you get 3 per order of the roast pork buns, and they're like little donuts with meat in there. So different flavors, but at the same time, it was just that nice like distinction of oh, okay. And then yeah, Milk Bar is just like super sweet, unique stuff. But anyway. Yep. All right. So what else can you guys tell us about your pod? Like, have you gotten some really good lessons out of it? Again, I don't know if we want to get really serious. If you're up for it, around again, you know, there's been the stuff recently, anti-Asian kind of culture or hate or whatever we want to call it. And yeah, again, you touched on some of that stuff in a few different episodes, and I'd love to hear some of your takeaways, and especially exploring those deeper topics, if you're willing to go there.
Well, I guess I can start on a surface level. I mean, just doing a podcast, you learn so many things about how easy or difficult it is to do a podcast. I think when we started this process and this project in general, in my head, I was thinking of like a professionally produced podcast where you have like those mics that are hanging over your head. And I was like, how are we going to do this? Like,
I did that. Oh. You're good.
I'm
trying to highlight you, man.
Okay. I was like, how are we going to do this? Like, how much time is it going to take? And it turns out once we researched it's not that intensive at all. Oops.
Yeah, that's why there's like over 1 million podcasts in rotation, I believe. Especially as lockdown happened, people are like, okay, I'll make a podcast, which I is kind of, you know, yeah. So I'm kind of in that boat as well. As I started mine last fall, I think. I don't know if we were in full. Yeah, we were in full lockdown. But yeah, it is easy and also and I want to give you guys credit too. You as somebody who's done, I think this is my 62nd episode or something like that. You guys were way ahead of me on production and you know, cutting in. I don't know. Love to maybe offline hear how you guys do some of that stuff. And I love that you have the like have a coffee with me thing of like support our podcast that way. And you guys have it nice and crisp and tight. And both of you have really good, I'll also say my subjective or whatever is you have really good, awesome like voices that play off each other really well. And yeah, Angela, I know Angela from coaching her in CrossFit. So I would have, you know, it's hard to be like, oh, like she's going to have a podcast. But yeah, totally. Again, just listening to it, you both have great like podcast voice. I still don't know that I qualify as that, and I'm gonna ever become a Joe Rogan, but that's fine. I'm fine with that. I enjoy these conversations.
Well,
And
hey, I
my
think
dog
that's
does not.
well, he or she will get around to liking it.
She's asleep
She.
over here for those listening in the back.
Well, going back to the production value and just the starting in the pandemic, we also started in the pandemic, but we started, I guess, like right in the pandemic. I think we got bored pretty quickly, and I was like, hey, I've always thought about doing a podcast, but never had time, never found the subject. Didn't have the kind of like energy to commit to it, but we all got very bored in the pandemic right away. And so I was like, all right, this seems like a productive hobby to pick up. And Jesse was someone I was able to convince to join me on this adventure.
No convincing needed, really. I was like, oh yeah, I'm also really bored. Let's do this.
Yeah, really. Yeah, I think we've learned a lot since then because it really came from like just for shits and giggles was like how we started this. And then with every conversation we've had with just each other or with guests, it's been like something new every time, right? And you talked about how everyone and their mom started a podcast during the pandemic, and you can see it as a bad thing of like, oh, well, now there's so much competition or whatever. But at least in our space, because our whole thing is about Asian American identity, I think it's been encouraging to see that there are a lot of other podcasts about identity and about the Asian community, because a recurring theme that we talk about pretty frequently is like lack of representation of our people. And you asked about the anti-Asian violence. I think it's tied into that because Asian people, one of the things we struggle with the most is this kind of like invisibility of our people. Like in the grand scheme of like race conversations, right? Asian people are often kind of like forgotten because we have this like white adjacency or whatever. Let's not get into the whole rabbit hole, but because we are doing this podcast ourselves and we're reaching out to a lot of people in the community and giving them voices, I think what's been really encouraging is seeing that like if we're not seeing the mass representation and voice that we want to see in like mainstream Hollywood, TV, whatever, we're going to step up and be that voice ourselves. So that's been really cool, is to be able to be this little step in that process and also meet a bunch of cool people along the way that are also kind of like trying to go towards that same path through whatever craft that they're focused on.
Yeah. Totally. I will ask the very, I guess, stereotypical question is how do you guys feel about Aquafina's from Queens and Parasite winning? And, is there like, that doesn't affect me, or do you connect to that? And like, okay, and Crazy Rich Asians, like all this, this stuff kind of coming to the forefront, I guess, a little bit. Do you feel like there is a little bit more representation coming around, or is it like you'd rather not see that? I'm just curious your take on some of that.
No, I mean, we're all for more Asians in mass media. And yeah, I think most people feel a sense of pride whenever they see someone who looks more like us on screen, because otherwise just no one looks like us. So it's like, hey, we'll take a little bit of anything at this point is our bar. But I think as more quality content is getting out there, our bar is kind of increasing of like, okay, it's not enough just to have us exist. Like we need to be represented as like multi-dimensional complex humans that we actually are in real life, right? So I think it's really encouraging to see this stuff, but at the same time, and I don't want to get too serious, but like, the Parasite thing is like, everyone was stoked when they won Best Picture, right? It was like broke norms all around that a foreign film could win that. And then shortly after is when the pandemic started, and then everyone started blaming everyone who looked Asian for, the world going to shit. So
Right.
it's unfortunate that there's kind of like simultaneously like a rise in our people in like mainstream culture, and then in real life in a day-to-day interaction it's kind of like the opposite and going downhill.
I do want to ask like a journalistic, if I can, kind of poke the bear question, if I may, of do you associate with, again, like, because you're both Taiwanese, yes? And so do you take pride in, again, like you said, people who look like us? Again, it's a Korean film. If there's, again, like all these different aspects of Asia, and John Oliver did a whole thing. I don't know if you saw his episode recently on just this topic exactly. What is Asian American? How do you even define that? Or just Asian? And so do you guys take pride in, like you said, like it sounds like you do. But yeah, is there any distinctions of Japanese versus Korean versus, or is it just, yeah, we're all in this kind of together of however you want to define it?
I mean, for me, I take pride in the fact that it's good work, and the fact that it's good work from, originating from Asian country is just bonus points. But the idea of representation is not to say like we want to see, as Angela mentioned, Asian people everywhere, like overrepresented or thrown into a piece just for the purpose of having an Asian person there. The point is still to look and experience and watch and engage with great pieces of art or film or music or whatever. And the fact that it is from an Asian person just makes it a little bit more special, because you know that some of them are coming from a shared background that you also understand. It's kind of like, if your hometown buddy made it real big, at least to me, I'm like, oh, yay. Like, I'm so happy for you, like I've known you, I've seen you, now you've made it.
Cool. Yeah, no, I totally get that. Side note question reminded me is Andrew Yang, yay or nay, because he's kind of leaning into a lot of the negative Asian stereotypes. So since we're on that topic, and since he is running for New York City mayor, and Jesse, you're in New York, and Angela, you're in San Fran now, right?
I'm a little bit nomadic currently.
Okay.
I'm right now in Palm Springs,
Oh,
but I was in San Francisco.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Andrew Yang, yay or nay? Are we?
Jesse, I'll punt it to you since you're closer to the
We did
results.
ranked choice voting.
Yes.
Which
he was a big fan of. And again, like when he
Yes.
was running for president, I'll just say real quick, I was like, I actually, of all the candidates, I was like, oh, this guy's talking about a lot of very cool stuff. So I definitely became a fan of his in that regard. But yeah, ranked choice voting. So yeah, he was somewhere in that mix.
I did rank him, but I did not rank him. I ranked him basically last. I think it's been really hard because each of the candidates at the get-go of their candidacies look really promising, and then like a bunch of them kind of halfway through got hit with a bunch of scandals that were really, like, it calls into question like the character of the person and like the values that they stand for. So for example, one of the front runners, Diana Morales, she's like a nonprofit executive, and she was saying all these things about like social justice and like worker rights organization. And in the meantime, her campaign was basically trying to suppress the campaign workers from unionizing. So it was kind of just like, you can talk the talk, but that's, walk the walk. So those are things that like really hit some of those like leading candidates. And Andrew Yang, I think the same thing. Like he started off really strong. People were like, we really like your viewpoints. And then he just kept like putting his foot in his mouth, like with all these gaffes, and people, it just like cracked his image pretty quickly. Yeah. And people realized like, oh, you're not really invested in being the mayor.
Right. Yeah, he said some funky stuff for sure. It was almost comical, but yeah. And then I don't remember which two candidates, but there were like 15 candidates or something. But two of them were like former housing related secretary, and they asked them like, what's the median income or median cost of a house in Brooklyn?
Sean Donovan, he didn't know.
There was another one that I think one was a black guy, one was a white guy, and yeah, one of them said like 90,000, and the other one said, I don't know, between 100 and 200,000. And the real answer, you guys know the answer?
Eric Adams, the median house price in Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn, yeah,
it's probably like $1 million.
900,000, yeah.
$1 million.
Yeah, exactly. But for two mayoral candidates to answer so far off was definitely like it's the old like the billionaire question, like how much is a gallon of milk kind of thing. And anyway, and anyway,
it's just a banana, Michael. How much could it be worth? $10?
Yeah. So you guys wanted to ask me, and we can change the topic a little bit. of where I'm actually from. And I don't know who wrote the actual answer in our little pre-whatever, but one of you did. And so I'll run with that and tell you where I am really from. As a white guy, nobody really cares where I'm really from. Poor me, poor straight white male. But I actually was a political refugee from the communist regime in Mother Russia in 1986. So yeah, I was 3 years old. We left Moscow, Russia. And there was actually a documentary, if anyone's interested, called Stateless, that kind of describes that time period and that experience of people fleeing and having to escape communist Russia. And so it was pretty, watching the documentary, like having been 3 years old when it happened, was pretty interesting. Basically, they take all your money and they kind of kick you out, and then you go to, I think, I actually forgot which country they took us to, and then we took a train, a crowded train, and then I think they were like, do you want to go to Israel or do you want to go to America? And we chose America. And then so we had to go to Italy for a few weeks or months. So we were in Rome, which I do have some memories of as a 3-year-old, the Colosseum and getting lost there. And then took a plane to Pan Am airplane to JFK. I remember that. And I used to tell people, because to your point about identity and a race and ethnicity and all that stuff, I was never happy with being Russian. So there is some interesting tie-ins. I mean, to differently, I'm almost xenophobic about, and because when I got to America, I wanted to fit in the early 90s, and there was the Cold War going on, and the Russians were the like stereotypical movie villain, whether it was, or the generic Soviet whatever, and like all these different movies. And I was like, oh, I don't think I want to be that or associated with that. So there was a little bit of fun times of being like, I'm Panamanian because I came over on a Pan Am airplane, or telling people I was like, oh, my family traveled a lot, so I was like born in Australia, or just random stuff because I was just like, I don't want to be Russian. And also I'll say again, growing up in Brooklyn in that environment, I don't know how many Russian folks you guys know, but there is a lot of racism in that, so I was around a lot of folks, and I was just like, yeah, I don't share these values. Cause again, I used to say I was raised on American television and Full House and Family Matters and whatever. And I was like, yeah, when y'all are talking and calling black people monkeys, and thinking that it's cool, I'm like, not down with that. So yeah. And again, growing up in Brooklyn, definitely, and then being one of the only white guys on a football team, to our last question there in terms of the last question I'll tee up is like Asians in fitness, but I actually did, and I don't mean to totally dominate the conversation. I want to hear from you guys, but I actually did, ironically to this whole theme, in our high school, Brooklyn Tech, we had majors. So my major was social science. And I was on the football team, and I was very interested in this diverse, racially kind of made up school, but also these teams and being on the football team. And so I actually did my social science research project as we understood like how to start doing research and, creating a sample size and doing questionnaires and all this fun stuff in high school about what factors affect commitment to a team. And because I noticed a lot of Asians were not as committed to teams, and they were not as participatory in sports, especially a sport like football, which is so far removed from the culture, right? And because the school was, we were I think 40 to 50% Asian, as it was. You had to take a test to get in. It was a very high achieving school. I think this year, in fact, we were ranked third, the second or third best high school in New York State, and like in the top 30 in the country or something like that. So anyway, the point being, it was an interesting thing of again looking into the racial kind of components and investigating that whole concept. But yeah, it was a very interesting thing for me to explore and understand, and it did also bring me a lot of understanding of different cultures and again also in the high school when I was there, we would have a culture day kind of thing, and I think there was over 180 cultures represented, where you would dress in like your whatever traditional garb, if you want to. I don't know if that's an offensive term anymore, or is, or it was, or whatever garb. Do you guys like the term garb? Is that a thing? I don't know.
I think it's a neutral term.
I don't
Neutral
think it matters.
terms.
Yeah.
Garb. It feels icky in my mouth. Garb. Anyway, but yeah, so that was my little history, whatever random anecdote about some of that stuff. So that's where I'm from, if that
Nice.
answers your question. Where I'm really from, I guess.
I mean, I
It's
think
funny
that raises an interesting point because, like, you know, a lot of people think about, like, hey, why should we care about these things? Like, why should we care that other people are being attacked? Like, why should we care about BLM, all these things? And it's really easy to forget how quickly the wheel turns and crushes you instead. And, like, there have been, like, in the history of our country, there have been situations like that where waves of immigration bring other types of people in, and the people there don't like that they're there. And so it's good to remember that, like, if you immigrated to the US, like, in the 1900s and you were Irish, you probably were treated the same shitty way. And also the Italians, you were treated the same shitty way. And to your point, the Russians during the Cold War. So it is very interesting, at least to me, how quickly people forget, like, you were there, your people were there, like, just a few years ago. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't like hundreds of years ago.
I'll piggyback off that for a second, just to kind of keep picking on Russian culture, to say, and there are a few of these groups of, you know, younger Russian immigrants who have these grandparents that they obviously care about, they love, but they're like, again, there's this like racist thing going on there. And so when BLM became a thing with, and again, a lot of Russians do like Trump because he's this dictator and he's talking about missile parades. And so, you know, so they were like, there's this kind of whatever moth to a flame kind of thing going on there. But what was interesting is, again, these Russian like grandchildren talking to their grandparents and being like, and them not understanding BLM basically, and being down, and them having to say, hey, you remember why you left Russia? Like, you were discriminated against because you were Jewish, and them being like, yeah, so, and they're like, well, that you didn't have opportunities there, right? And they'd be like, yeah, but that, like, those are black people. I don't like black. They're different from me. And it just being this disconnect around, again, that racial identity versus like we're all oppressed, and like you should be taking the side of the oppressed, right? And like, and this huge disconnect again of it's an interesting thing that again, that kind of triggered that thought for me, at least.
A question I have for you is, because Jesse and I pretty frequently talk about when we were growing up, and even there's still some aspects now, I'm sure, but we desperately wanted to be white, and we just were pretty like rejecting of our Asian upbringing and culture. And because you wanted to not be the enemy of people, you were rejecting your Russian heritage at the time. I'm curious if now, as an adult, you've like re-embraced any more of that culture. No, poor Mother Russia.
Yeah, Mother Russia. I mean, yeah, at this point, I'm removed from that concept of it, but I do think, yeah, there's just a lot of stuff that I don't love about the culture. I don't associate with it. I feel like, again, like the concept of your podcast of where you're really from. Yeah, again, I was 3 years old when I left, so I don't have, you know, a huge connection to the culture. And again, because I ran away from it as a child in my youth, I don't have that like deep rooted connection. My sister is a good example of that question. She's 10 years older than me, so she had a lot more connection to the culture. She went back and visited. I have no interest in even visiting the country, and like it's like number 72 on my list of, you know, places that I do want to go if I'm going to take time and travel. Again, there's some level of like, that's where I come from. Like my grandfather fought for Russia in World War II. You know, they were also Jewish, so they were escaping the Holocaust. And that's another whole totally different tangent of like, I don't, the whole, whether or not I'm Jewish, that's another conversation. Cause I just grew up like, that's a religion versus it being a culture and being something that's like, oh, my parents were Jewish, so I'm Jewish. So that's a whole nother conversation I don't even want to touch on right now. But yeah, to your question. So my sister, when she came over, she had to go to a high school, Lincoln High School, for anyone familiar with Brooklyn, which was a lot more it wasn't as prestigious. You didn't have to take a test to get in, and there was a lot more like crime and things like that going on. There was a lot less good of a high school, and she very quickly found her Russian folks, and again, like I think dove deeper into that echo chamber or bubble, if you will. And they're still all friends, like all these years later. And she got married to one of the guys in that group. So, and they're very, again, like Russian culture. They live in a very Russian community down in Sheepshead Bay in Brooklyn. So, and I'll share with this, and I've touched on it a few times. Again, she's in that kind of racist-y, BLM-y thing where I'm like, I don't think she listens to this. So if you are, Dina, I'm happy to talk to you about it. But we got into some political and racial stuff, and I'm just like, again, and she went to the let's agree to disagree, and I'm like, we can't agree to disagree about racism. Like, I just can't do that part. Like, it's a pretty big value. So yeah, obviously, you know, there's still some conversation there. So yeah, happy to dive further down that path if you want, but since I'm getting interviewed now, that's fine.
Yeah, sorry,
that's all right.
Default to our
Hijacked it.
It's all right. Totally fine. Totally fine. But yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Well, maybe we pan back to where you were trying to transition us to, where I re-hijacked it for.
That's all right. It's totally fine.
question.
So yeah, we were talking about Asians and fitness as a total sidebar note, I guess at this point. Total change of pace. So I'll throw the question out to you guys of you know, again, culturally, and what your impressions of Asians in fitness are. Again, we, Angela and I met in a CrossFit gym in New York City. So that's kind of where I think some of that comes from. Again, I'm deeply rooted in health and fitness, and I think a lot of folks who do listen to me here are, again, enjoy some aspects of that space. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how that fits into culture. And we'll talk about, I'll say quickly on CrossFit, and having run a CrossFit gym in Dubai and seeing the Asian growth a few years behind maybe of the rest of the world. But there definitely was some taking to the concept of CrossFit, and I'd love to, again, hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think we wanted to talk about it because you're deeply in this space. I think there are two aspects of it that we were interested in. One is like, as it relates to kind of beauty standards, similar to beauty standards, right? Because I think a reason why you don't see that many Asian people in working in fitness or like as the models of fitness or whatever, is like twofold. On the Asian side, it's like Eastern side, it's because traditionally in the past, like what's considered beautiful for women is like super stick thin, and not through exercise. It's like through, you know, starvation, and like essentially you have no muscle. It's just like skinny fat, right? And then for men, even though it's a different kind of beauty standard, because men are not glorified for like muscular or big kind of physiques necessarily. There's a lot more kind of like slender or like slim but fit type beauty standards. So then in the US, when you try to translate that over, it doesn't really fit well, because at least speaking as a woman, right, like being an Asian woman who likes fitness doesn't fit nicely into that concept, because then I'm not skinny necessarily because I'm like bigger muscular wise, and I'm tan because I like being in the sun, so I'm not like super pale white, which is the other beauty standard. And I think it's scary for a lot of Asian women to dive into the idea of like getting super fit, because then I think it takes away from what they think femininity is. So then they're afraid to dive into it if it's only just for like your own health, but definitely not as like a career. So I think that's a big aspect of, at least for Asian women, why they're not like super well represented in the fitness space.
What's your question?
Oh, that wasn't a question. I'm just expressing.
I thought you were
didn't
teeing it
know
up.
if you were seeing similar things, because you've worked in fitness for a long
Yeah.
time, and there, at least as far as I saw, there were no Asian CrossFit coaches or anything.
Well,
Like
I'll stop you there, cut you off there, and say, ironically-ish, the one of the main coaches we had in Dubai when I went out to Dubai to run the box, she is half Hong Kongian. I still don't know if that's the right way to say that either, but she's from Hong Kong, and her father was Scottish. So, but she is living in Hong Kong right now, and she is she's very good looking. We'll just say that. She no matter how much she works out, she has difficulty putting on a lot of muscle, maybe because of the genetics of that kind of Asian. But she's tall and slender, to your point about like that Asian beauty standard. And so she might be a good person to either have on your show, or I might circle back and have her on mine as well. But she is trying to break that stereotype as well of like, look at me, I'm over here squatting as heavy as I can. Like, I want to get bigger. And that's the other part of it too, that again, was the parallel thought I would say going on as you were describing the scenario is, again, most people don't understand, and again, in the fitness space, and there is that stereotype or the fears, but it comes back to, you're not going to get bulky. And again, like, I don't know how you feel. I do want to push it back to you a little bit, Angela, of saying like, yeah, you got a little more darker skin, if you will, just from being out and being more active or whatever, but going away from that pale standard, if you will. But the other part of that being, do you feel like you changed a lot physically, like from CrossFit? Like you got bulky versus being like, skinny and lean?
I mean, look, I didn't become like an Olympic weightlifter or anything, but I think it totally depends on your body type. Like for me, because I'm shorter, I can get bulkier more so than slender. I think it's harder for my body type to be slender. So yeah, I got big. I mean, my arms are pretty big for like proportional to my body size. So I think when I was like peak CrossFit, going like 5 days a week, doing paleo, all that stuff, it was like, I look pretty big for for my stature, I think.
Right. And that's the other thing that I was thinking of, and a lot of those beauty standards that we're talking about are from hundreds of years ago, and the paleness comes from right, and I'm sure you guys know this, but like comes from showing that you don't have to be outside to work, right? And so therefore you're indoors, therefore you get pale, and that's a beauty standard. Or even going further back to like the Renaissance of these very chubby women in paintings that we see, where again the beauty standard was, hey, if you have enough money that you're able to be fat and you don't need to work, like let's celebrate that. And then eventually that standard went away as well. So I don't know if we're ready for the next revolution just yet. But I'm actually doing a TED Talk, and I have a meeting with one of my high school guidance counselors who coaches people, and he has a podcast called It's About to Go Down, I think is what they're called, with his partner Kathy. And so they coach people on honing in their message to become like a TED Talk, and so that's something down the line. I bring it up because my concept is redefining fitness and redefining how we're talking about these concepts, and how can we make it like, hey, that's great that you're a little bulkier than maybe the beauty standard tells us, but at the same time, like, you're healthier, you're able to, and again, it's a beauty standard, right? And what's underlying under that, and I don't want to get all like professory or too philosophical, but like what's underlying that is that kind of sexual concept to it, right? Of like mating and all this. And at the same time, at the end of the day, because you're doing CrossFit 5 times a week, I bet you were in the best shape of your life, and you were the most, like, your blood work is the best it's ever been. And now again, we're putting my concept of money into the long-term retirement plan, right? Like you're going to be healthier when you're 65. You're going to be more robust. You're going to be able to have, pardon, anyone listening, better sex, right? Like you guys did just do an episode about intimacy and everything like that. So I feel like you've opened that door already. But yeah, I think that it's changing the conversation. I don't know how it's ever going to happen on a cultural level, but I feel like, again, like looking at, fitness has become, it's kind of morphed since the 80s, let's say. It's obviously morphed for a long time, but in the 80s, it was that, Jane Fonda, whatever, neon stuff, and doing aerobic classes, jazzercise, all that fun stuff. And now, now with the pandemic, the big thing was Peloton. And again, you got these coaches, yelling at you and everything like that. Again, my hope is, between the work I do, between the conversations I have like these, is to talk about redefining fitness of it's looking at, again, is it all right for you to be bulkier? if you can go and do stand-up paddleboard and then go climb a 14-mile, hike the next day and do all these different things. And again, I think that the way the world's opened up, like I'd like to think that we're heading there. And again, I think the booty Instagram model, as popular as they are, and again, the girl Christine that I was talking about, the Scottish Hongian one, bless you, Jesse, and thank you for the mute on that one. She loves to point out, again, like there's those booty fitness models versus like what is real fitness, and like being able to do 100 burpees faster than you were 6 months ago is indicative of all these different things. So yeah, I'm trying to hone this message, and I think it becomes very boring and less sexy. But at the same time, in terms of the beauty standards and how that ties into, I don't know what that would take from like you're saying. Do we need like an Asian Jillian Michaels to be up there, yelling at people?
Hey,
and
that.
Yeah, and so yeah, like Christine, again, I'll keep shouting her out because she would be an awesome person to be on there, because again, she's really good looking, and she's always kind of playing around with that concept of like, should I just be ass and tits, and like, or can I actually talk about like some real, like why is squatting important, why is deadlifting important? So it's less sexy, but yeah, it's an interesting side of that whole fitness thing for sure. I could talk about this for hours for sure, if you can't tell already, but yeah, I don't know if there was anything in there that either resonated with either of you guys, or how that might tie into your question.
Well, I do have a question, because I think, we're coming at it from more like, we're Asian Americans, so we can't speak to how Asian people in Asia are portrayed. I'm sure there are many fitness Asians in Asia, but here there are not many Asian Americans in the fitness industry. And one of the questions that I often have is like, how do you find somebody who will coach you, not understanding necessarily your body type and like what you need? It's very similar to like when I choose a barber. Like some people don't understand how to cut Asian hair, and
Right.
you'll come out looking like, you'll never come out looking good. So you have to like pick carefully. And so I'm wondering if you have, knowledge about how instruction works with people of different races, knowing that that race can mean that their body type responds differently to a different exercise regimen.
I want to jokingly answer your question by saying I don't see color when it comes to
Body type.
Well, right. That's the thing is I think your question is about like, coaching Asian specifically versus having that conversation. So like if we were going to work together tomorrow, Jesse, I would put you on the, put the question out there of, do you want to have a lean, type of body type? There's only 3 body types in all of existence that we know of, right? There's, and you can kind of test that if you guys are interested by wrapping your thumb and middle finger around your wrist. And if they connect and if they just touch, you're a mesomorph. If they overlap, then you're on the leaner body type. And if I can't see quite what you guys are doing, but if they don't reach, then you are on the what I forget the exact terms actually right now, but you're on the like bigger boned.
I'm obese. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, you have very fat wrists. You have very fat wrists. No, but all joking aside, is like there's only those 3 body types in all seriousness. And yeah, there is a genetic predisposition to be one of those 3 body types. And again, we could say, yeah, Angela, your body type is again, it's thicker than Jesse. Jesse's pretty lean. And again, that might be genetic, that might be lifestyle, that might be a combination of things. But yeah, that bone structure isn't going to change much. And again, jokingly, we don't really get fat wrists. So it's a question of that. And then it's coming back to, like, what are your goals with fitness versus, again, I only work with people who care about, when it comes to my clients and people who actually pay me, people who are actually concerned about their long-term health. And we can talk about blood work and we can talk about lifestyle. And again, like and this is a line from CrossFit that I'll give them credit for. When you chase aesthetics that you guys are kind of talking about, and again, I totally understand it. But when you chase aesthetics, you rarely catch the aesthetics, and it takes a lot more work. And like I said early on jokingly about, like, if I didn't love food so much, I'd probably have a 6-pack and look great based on how much I work out. But I also work out as much as I do because I love food so much. So anyway, that's a whole different conversation. But at the end of the day, coming back to it, if you chase aesthetics, you rarely catch it. But if you chase fitness and this bigger concept of, you're talking about going to CrossFit 5 days a week, like staying consistent, staying injury-free, moving. And again, we could talk about the programming of the CrossFit. Is CrossFit the best thing for you? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you need more cardio-based stuff. Maybe you need, and people talk about toning and things like that. At the end of the day, we know what helps you improve your lifespan, not your health span. So staying out of the medical system is really what I care about, keeping you off medications. And again, you guys are just turned 30, right? So you're just again, I heard that episode as well, and
exposed.
And again, you're just gonna learn, as everyone does when they hit 30. That's like the first, and you start getting those aches and pains. It becomes about. And again, when people talk to me about who I want to work with and my avatar for my business, I cut the age off at like 35. That doesn't mean I wouldn't work with either of you by any means, but I say like my target audience is like 35 to 50, because that's the folks that are probably more in that like kind of struggle already, and reaching the younger folks like you guys. And I feel very old now saying stuff like that, but yeah, reaching. Well, you just have different values in that sense, again, because you might be thinking like, yeah, I don't want to be that bulky, or I want to keep my lean figure. And it's like, well, when can we have a conversation about, again, what does your blood work look like? What are your vitamin D levels like? Because you haven't had those struggles per se on that side. So yeah, again, I don't want to go too far down. I appreciate where you guys are going with the questioning, but I don't want to, again, do my TED talk right now, because it's not ready yet, is what I'm saying. It's not ready yet. Anyway, but did that answer your question? Again, like I feel like I jumped around a little bit, but yeah, to your question, Jesse, of how to work with somebody with different. I don't think you're gonna have necessarily respond differently. Again, if we start lifting weights, you're not gonna like blow up and get bulky per se. But it's having that conversation again with every single client, with every single person, and having that same conversation with Angela. It might be, hey, you don't want to get as bulky, but at the same time, like, how do you feel about being strong? Are you okay being strong? And like, we know that your body type might lead you to feel bulkier than you want. And we can balance that out with, okay, like we might need to do 4 cardio sessions to every 2 strength sessions, instead of kind of, maybe the opposite of that. And just having that conversation, having that long-term vision. And that's where, again, the fitness industry is certainly lacking. And again, that's where I feel like this redefining fitness is necessary. And hopefully that makes some sense. And I ramble, and that's why I have my own podcast, so I can ramble and F it. I don't know.
Love it.
Question answered.
Yes.
Question answered.
Okay. That was it. Anyway, me being the host here, I feel like, if you guys have other questions, I'm happy to, as we open that topic up. Do you have follow-up questions on the fitness side? And yeah, totally to your point, I do want to say it's that representation in like media again. Like, when are we going to see even a person? And I see this stuff for physical therapists all the time. How physical therapists are portrayed in media as well. So that's like the people who look like me, so to speak. They were in Cobra Kai recently, and that guy was like a hippy dippy physical therapist. Like, let's have positive vibes, bro. And it's like, yeah, that's not physical therapy. But anyway, the point being, yeah, I think it's a good takeaway to say, I think we can continue to have that representation, and in the fitness industry specifically. It'd be super interesting to see or talk about, like in actual Asia, how is that fitness trend like emerging? Was there a similar Peloton? Is it about suffering? Is it about like, work? Or is it more, can we have like a more interesting conversation? And again, there's that like you said, and you even said it with that little disdain, Angela, of like, I didn't become like a weightlifter. But there is that like Chinese weightlifting thing. I don't know. Maybe there's something there. If we're gonna psychoanalyze the whole thing, but anyway, I don't want to overstep any bounds or get too psychoanalytical either. That's my wife's department. That's her thing. She's the PhD in psychology.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah.
Fancy.
With her specialty is in, if you guys aren't familiar, is in sex and relationship therapy.
Very
So,
interesting.
See that on your Instagram.
Yeah, always raises some eyebrows. I'm like, oh. And then save your questions. Save your questions. You can ask them separately. Don't ask them here. Everyone's always like, what's the weirdest thing you've dealt with? And it's always the same questions. Everyone wants to know. And anyway, but yeah, back to you guys. So I think we covered a lot of stuff, and I want to be respectful of your time. If you have any other, did anything else jump out to you guys? Again, I took over a little bit based on you guys kind of questioning me. So did anything stand out to you? Was there anything we didn't cover that you wanted to cover?
No.
Not that I could think of, no.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, what can we expect from your podcast? Coming back to that, of anything exciting coming up that you wanted to plug or promote?
Yeah, well, just that we are now into our season 4. So we just kicked that off a few episodes ago, but we have new episodes every Friday through, I think, September. So just find us wherever you listen to podcasts, but where are you really from? And yeah, look forward to hopefully having some of you join our listeners.
Awesome. Jesse, any closing thoughts?
No, this has been a great conversation. Angela, plug the podcast, but follow us on the socials.
Oh,
If
where are you
have
from
it-
pod?
Exactly.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you guys have any like fitness thoughts, you can send them our way if you want as well. Although neither of us are fitness
No,
folks
send
per
them
se.
to Bo. Don't send them
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take them, and if they're Asian related or racially ambiguous, we can go down that path there. There you go.
Yes. Come to us
Um,
with the thought catalog stuff.
Yeah. Awesome, guys. Well, yeah, very exciting stuff. Appreciate you being on. Again, hopefully we didn't offend too many people. Me specifically, as again, very difficult being, and I say this jokingly. I don't know if should keep saying that joke, but yeah, very difficult being a straight white male in this modern world. I appreciate a little bit of laugh there. Thank you. Hopefully, again, anyone listening knows I'm joking, and I have the best of intentions. I swear. Don't cancel me, people. I'm not even a thing. I don't know if I can be canceled if I'm not even like a thing. You know what I mean? I don't know. Anyway, those are my closing thoughts. Lexi needs a walk, so we might go do that. Oh, this is all. If you guys didn't notice, the cameras are backwards, so it takes a while to figure out what's happening there. Anyway, all right. Well, again, signing off. If you guys made it this far, I really appreciate it, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a rating, comment, all that good stuff wherever you listen to your podcast. Go check these guys out. But where are you really from? Podcast, and also on the socials. For sure. We're going to sign off. I hope the conversation got you guys 1% better. And we got to get in touch with Kirstine. I'll say that out there. Very good looking girl.